Trust me, this is way easier than you think. So today I'm going to be showing you how to make chicken bone broth. And you might be thinking, why bone broth? Well, first off, it's going to save you money because all those bones that you've paid for but might have thrown away or given to your dog or thrown in the woods or whatever, now you're going to be getting another meal basically out of that. Second is that bone broth has great flavor. It's super delicious and it's a great base for a lot of recipes. So it's going to make anything that you make with it taste more delicious. And the third reason is nutrition. There are nutrients locked up in those bones, but when you make bone broth, you get to draw those nutrients out and get them for yourself. So the first thing you're gonna need to do is get yourself some chicken bones and put them in your slow cooker. Now you can use raw or cooked bones. In this batch, I actually have a mix of raw and cooked, and that just depends on how you got them. You know, if you roast a whole chicken and have the bones left over, that's fine, but if you debone a chicken to cook the pieces without the bone and then you have the raw bones left over, those work too. It doesn't really matter, it's just about whatever you have. Once your bones are in there, then you're gonna add your veggies, and this is a way to flavor your broth as well as add some extra nutrients. Now you can use fresh vegetables for this, but what I actually like to do is use veggie scraps. So whenever I cut up an onion and I have the peel left over, or I have the ends of a carrot or the ends of a celery or something like that, I just throw them in a bag in the freezer and then I pull them out when it's time to make my broth. So as you can see in this batch, I have a little bit of carrot, some celery, some onion, some garlic. If you had some fresh herbs, you could throw those in too. And this is a great way to use up veggies that are also going bad in your fridge. So if you bought some herbs and they're kind of on the way out, you can toss them in the bag in the freezer and then you can use them in your stock so they're not gonna go to waste. The only things you don't wanna put in your broth are things like broccoli or cauliflower or cabbage, those kind of stinky cruciferous vegetables, because they're just gonna stink up your whole broth. So you're gonna wanna leave those out. But carrots, celery, onion, ginger peels, all of that stuff can go in there and it's delicious. Now that your veggies are in, you can add a little sprinkling of salt. This is really gonna depend on how big your slow cooker is, you know, how much you're making at one time. Just a little sprinkling is fine. And remember, it's better to do less because you can always add some later when you actually use the stock in your cooking. But once you put it in there, you can't take it out unless you like dilute the stock with water. So I always say if you're unsure, do less and you can always add more later. You can also add some peppercorns at this step. I just happen to be out, so I didn't add any, but they can also be really great in your stock. Next, you're gonna wanna add your water. So just pour in your water until it covers the bones and the vegetables and the slow cooker is full. You can throw in a bay leaf for good measure, and then you're gonna wanna add some sort of acid. Here, I'm adding apple cider vinegar, and this is just like a tablespoon or two, again, depending on how big your slow cooker is and how much stock you're making. And the point of this acid is to help pull those nutrients out of the bone. So that extra acid is going to help you get the most out of your bones possible. And now you just set your slow cooker on low and step away and let it do the work. Now you're gonna wanna let this go for at least 10 to 12 hours, but you can definitely do it longer. I usually do mine for more like 24 hours, and this batch actually was in there for 36 hours. And the longer you go, it just means you're gonna pull more nutrients out of the bones. Now you can go too long, you don't just wanna let it go forever, but up to 36 hours, I've had good experience with that. So if you go for that long, it should be totally fine. Once your broth is done, then it's time to filter it. So you're gonna wanna turn off your slow cooker, remove the lid, and then I like to take a colander or a strainer and set that over a really large bowl. And then I just ladle in all of the vegetables and liquid and bones and everything into the colander to separate that liquid from all of those bigger pieces. And now you'll notice here that when your stock is done, if you've done a good job of pulling the nutrients out of those bones, that the bones will actually crumble between your fingers when you squeeze them. And it's pretty cool, so you might want to try it. Just a warning though, if the bones are still super hot, you can burn yourself. So be careful and maybe do this once things have cooled off a little bit. So once the liquid down in that large bowl, all of your broth, has cooled a bit, then you're gonna wanna put it in your containers. Now, I like to store mine in mason jars. You just wanna be careful, make sure, like I said, that you let it cool so you don't shock the jars, but I ladle mine in there, and here's where I do a second filtration. So I put a very fine mesh strainer over the jar, and I actually use a wide mouth canning funnel to help with this too. and that just helps get out any little teeny bits of grit or meat or bone or vegetable or whatever that is still floating around in the broth. Now, when you're doing the second filtration, you can also skim off the fat from the broth, which I've done before, but frankly, that takes a little bit of work. So instead, what I like to do is once it's all filtered in the jars, then I put those jars in the fridge, and after the liquid cools down, all the fat is gonna float to the top and it'll form like a little disc, and then you can just pop that disc of fat right off. So it's a lot easier than trying to separate it out when it's hot. And if you want to, you can cook that fat down to render it and have like a chicken fat to cook with, or you can just toss it if you don't want to do that. Now that you've got your broth in your jars, you can either use it immediately for a soup or to cook rice or quinoa, or you can freeze it. Just make sure when you freeze it, if you are freezing it in the glass, that you're using jars with straight sides, no like narrow jars with big shoulders, because that can be an area where it could crack. And also you want to make sure you leave plenty of room in the jar for the liquid to expand when it freezes, because again, we don't want any cracked jars or glass floating around in our freezer or in our broth. So that's how you make chicken bone broth. And if you have any questions about the process or anything I talked about in the video, then feel free to leave those in the comments below. And if you are new and you want more real food tips and tricks, then make sure you subscribe to my channel. Eating real food is so important for your health, but it's not always easy, especially when you're just starting out. But I know that if you have the information and the tools and the resources that you need, that you can totally do it. And that's why I make these videos, because I want to make living a real foods lifestyle as easy for you as possible. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your real foods journey. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.